On the res alone at night. My uncle and cousin saw a large deer on the side of the road. When they got closer, it hopped over the fence like a bipedal man. One time driving back from Gallup, my dad saw an old Navajo woman walking on the side of the road, and when he slowed to offer her a ride, she took off into the plains, quickly within human speed. Once when I was a kid, my family was at my aunt's house, which is in a rural, secluded area, when we were toyed with by a few entities. They would make animal noises, and when we looked in the direction from which the noises were coming, they would turn a flashlight on and off. The noises would come from all directions, in increasingly shorter succession. Usually when I'm there, on the reservation visiting, alone late at night, I will feel the presence of evil and dread. Panic and paranoia will wash over me, and as sudden as it comes, it will leave. Lucy is watching me. My grandmother on my mother's side has always been very superstitious. For lack of better words, she's not religious, but she does believe in a lot of paranormal stuff. Her mother was full-blooded Navajo, and her father was Irish. Either way, she'd never been anywhere east of Montana, and she grew up in Nevada. One year, when I was in grade school, we went to visit her. Most of the visit was uneventful, typical boring old people stuff, except she always kept her curtains drawn shut and would always peek out the window, and when someone asked what she was doing, she would simply reply, Lucy is watching me. This went on for nearly the entire visit until a few days before we were due to leave. My grandma and my then baby brother, he's 19 now, he was in the front yard that evening, planting flowers, when suddenly, my grandmother starts shouting, "Get away from that creature. It's not safe." Of course, being in Nevada, we all assumed that my brother had found a scorpion or a rattlesnake, so we all run outside. To see my grandmother clutching my little brother and shaking in terror against the side of the house, standing out in the yard, was a large, black, Great Dane-sized dog. It was staring at my grandmother with an intensity I'd never seen before. It looked up at us, gave a little huff and bounded off. I don't remember if it moved unusually fast or not, but do remember it had deep, yellow eyes. When my mother asked my grandmother what had happened, she kept repeating the Lucy has found me. She moved a couple weeks after that. It moved like a toy rocking horse. My uncle is Mexican and Native American. This happened in the Mojave Desert in Southern California. He was driving around with his girlfriend late at night, and they saw something that looked like a huge black dog on the side of the road. He slowed down, and the dog began crossing the road. Instead of walking like a normal dog would, this thing moved like a toy rocking horse. He said it stopped in the middle of the road and stared right at them, and its eyes had a red glow. My uncle is the most badass person I know, and it scared the crap out of him. They ran away on their back legs. So, this happened about 12 years ago. My family owns a farm in the heart of an Indian reservation. One winter I was home for Christmas taking care of the farm while my parents were away Christmas shopping. As I was home by myself, it was way late in the night, and I heard all our cows freaking out. I knew it had to be the wild dogs that are rampant in the area. So, I threw on some boots, grabbed a shotgun, loaded it up, and headed out to the field. This was a perfect scenario for a horror movie. It was cloudy, but there was a full moon, and it was breaking through the clouds just right to light up all the snow. I ran out into the middle of the field, and just in time I saw two dogs. They were standing up facing each other and fighting. I think perfect 2 for 1. So, I pumped a shell into the chamber of Mr. 12 gauge, and then it happened. The two dogs heard the rack. They both stopped, looked over at me, and ran away, on their back legs. Immediately I froze, and every ghost story about skinwalkers and all the other native legends I grew up with flew through my mind. Keep in mind I am a white guy, and up until then, these were all just boogeyman stories the native kids like to tell to scare us. That night, they became real to me. It had a dog's body but with human hands and feet. I was spending a month with my cousins at my grandma's house. It was August, and my cousins' ages ranged from 10 to 15, and I was the oldest, being 15. I was staying with a 10, 13, and 14-year-old. We stayed up telling scary stories often, but one night a few weeks in, we decided to make a campfire outside. My grandma's house is in a rural suburb. The neighbors aren't too far when you're driving down the road to her house, but in the backyard, it's thick forest with man-made paths through it. Each house is on a hill, so only part of the basement was underground. That isn't important until later, though. So, we're towards the east side of her yard, in a smallish patch of open land. You couldn't see the neighboring yards from there, and there was probably 3/4 of a mile to each side of us that belonged to my grandma. It was maybe 11 at night, and we were playing truth or dare after telling scary stories, and my 14-year-old cousin dared me and the 13-year-old to go walk through the paths for 10 minutes or so. I said yes right away, as I wasn't easily scared and rather level-headed, but my younger cousin was a bit more hesitant. We didn't bring a flashlight because it wasn't pitch dark yet, and we could see enough to not die. We were walking along the paths for about 5 minutes, and could barely see the fire in the trees when we decided to turn. In the middle of the path was a large dog-like creature, hunched over with its front hands an inch from the ground. What I remember most was how its eyes were so fucking bright white, and it was humanoid dog shaped with a human-like head but a dog-like body, but human hands and feet. It looked right at us, and I knew I was paralyzed with fear as it dashed away the opposite way from us, towards a creek that ran through the yard. Eventually, my cousin and I screamed bloody fucking murder, and the other cousins, and my grandma ran to us. I don't remember much here because I was really disoriented and I couldn't think properly, but I did wake up in bed, so I assumed that I was brought up to the house. All the kids slept in the basement, in a big room with sliding glass doors to the outside, as the room was on the side that wasn't underground. My bed was pressed against a big glass window, and I could see my cousins playing outside down below. The house is in Michigan, so it gets slightly chilly even in the end of August, and there was a slight breeze, so I put on a jacket and ran to join them outside, skipping breakfast, not wanting to miss out on anything fun. When I got down, I could tell they weren't playing but rather running to get my grandma. Her dogs, both, were dead, ripped up. That night we went to bed early. I woke up at maybe 2 in the morning because I felt something hit my head. My cousins were all sitting on the double bed opposite me on the other side of the room. There was 1 bunk bed and 2 double beds, the double beds for me and my 14-year-old cousin. They were quiet and staring at me. The 13-year-old nodded his head toward the window. I froze. They all looked afraid. I turned my head slightly to the side, and I saw a really messed up looking face pressed to the window with gaping eyes looking down at me. I screamed so fucking loud, and it bolted. My grandma called the police after I told her what happened, and they found nothing. I went home after that, and I have never been there during the night again.